I then want to create a series of work planes. First I'll turn sketch number 1 and 2 back on so I can see those, and I'm going to do a plane along path, and I want to select this curve right here, and remember there's a construction line underneath there, so you might accidentally get the construction line, but I'll get this curve so it's that long curve, and then I'm going to put it at the end of that curve. So I'll put proportional distance 1. Now it may be 0 on yours, so it'll either be a 0 or a 1, and notice it'll also put it perpendicular to the end of that curve. And so that is my first work plane. Then I want to add a second work plane, and I will do this along path again, and I'm going to move my cursor along here till I find the end of this curve or the beginning of this curve, and so I will then put either a distance 1 or 0 in again to put it at the beginning or end of that curve. So that completes my second work plane. For my third work plane, I want it to be vertical at this line, and so I will do a plane at angle, and I will select this line, and I want to rotate that around and put it in at a 90-degree angle, which would then be vertical. For my next work plane, I want it to be vertical, but I want it to be going through the center of this arc right here. So I'm going to do that with an offset plane, and I'll offset it off of this plane, and I'll tell it to go to object through the center of this circle, and so it will offset it that distance, put it through the center of that circle. Now a plane actually goes out to infinity, so we can move the plane around, or we can resize the plane. If I get one of the corners of the plane, I can resize the plane, and so maybe I want this to be down here. Yeah, so now I have that plane, but it still goes to infinity. Isn't really dependent on the visibility of the plane, and maybe I want this one to be down like this. So we're going to build our handle down here. So for visual purposes, it might be best to have those oriented about like that. For my next plane, I want it to be at the end of this line right here, so either the end of this line or the end of this curve. So again, I'll do plane along path, and when I try to do that, it's selecting the entire path, and I'm not getting a good location to do that. So what I'm going to do is put in some construction geometry to help locate that. So I'll edit sketch number 2, and I'm going to draw a line at the end point of this line, and I want it to be perpendicular to that line. If I go back and scrub that line and then set it where it is perpendicular, now I have a location, and I don't like to leave geometry just hanging in space. So I think what I will do is see if I can do a coincident between this line and this line. Now when I do that, I have a projected line here and an object line here. I want those to be construction line type. So I'll select those, and I'll do construction. I'll finish that sketch, and now I'll do my plane at angle, and I'll select this line, and I want that angle to be 90 degrees to the angled line. So I have a compound angle. It's on this line, which is at an angle, and then 90 degrees to that line. I'll use another, or the end of this line, to create another plane. I might need to put in a construction line like I did up here, but I want it perpendicular to the end of this line. So I'll do plane along path, and I'm able to select this path, but I'll go ahead and, in fact, let's just put it back in here, to see how I'm going to move that to the end. And so I'll put in, it'll either be 0, in this case it is 0, or it will be 1 to move it to the end of that line. And again, I can resize these planes if I would like to make them a different appearance. Now I'm going to offset this plane, so I'll do offset plane and I'll select this plane. I'm going to bring this down here a distance of minus 0.35. Alright, so I have my work planes that I'm going to use to create some additional profile sketches. I realized that I want to put an additional sketch in here, and it really doesn't matter whether I put it in now or if I put it before the work planes, but I'm going to just demonstrate that I can drag the timeline back before the work planes, and then I will do a new sketch on the XY plane. And again, make sure that you are currently in the correct active component. And then I'm going to project geometry, so I'll do P for project geometry, and I'm going to project this line right here, and I'm also going to project this arc right here. And there's actually two arcs here. There's the one in Sketch 1, and there's also another one in Sketch 2. So I prefer to get both of them from the same sketch, and so I'll project this arc, and then I'll turn off Sketch 2, and so I see that I have this arc projected and this line projected. I'm going to change both of these to construction lines, and it might be a little bit difficult to see, so perhaps I'll just leave those as object lines for now, and then I'll change them to construction lines in a little bit. And then I'm going to draw a circle at the center of this arc, and I'll come down about like that, and I will dimension this, and I'm going to dimension it as a radius dimension. So I'll right click, I'll tell it radius dimension, and I'll put in 0.295. And then I'm going to draw an arc coming off of this arc, so I'll do a 3-point arc, and I'll draw that arc from here over someplace on this line about right there, and then I want it tangent to this arc, and I will dimension this arc as 0.164. And I might change that to 0.165. I will then dimension the location from the center of this arc back to this center of this circle, and that horizontal distance, I'll do that as 0.35. I am then going to draw a line. I want it tangent to this arc, so if I hold the mouse button down, you see how it's going to do that tangent, and I'm going to come down and click about like that. I want this line to be parallel to this projected line, so I'll do parallel, I'll select this line, I'll select this line, and now it's parallel. The end of it's still a white dot, so I'll dimension this, and I want the aligned length of this line to be 0.215. And then I'm going to trim off the excess of this arc, so I'll do trim, and I'll trim off this arc, and so I have a line coming up to this arc, and then I have this arc, and then I'm going to put a line at this point, and I want it tangent to this arc. If I scrub that arc and come down here, it should put it tangent automatically. And I decided I actually don't want this arc coming all the way down here, so I'm going to undo that line, and I'll put it in again. I'm going to put it up here someplace, and I'm going to come down here with it tangent, and I'm going to trim off this little piece right here. So I'll do trim, I'll trim off this little piece of arc right there, and I'm going to put a point at this intersection between this line and the projected line, and I'll dimension the location from this point back to the center of this circle, and I'll do that a dimension of 0.47. Let's change that 0.465, and I got it in the wrong dimension. 0.4. Now notice it won't let me put in that dimension because with these other dimensions that doesn't make logical sense. So let's do 0.475. What I'm putting in here is some offset or clearance between components. So this is my original starting geometry, and then this will give me an offset distance. Let's go ahead and dimension the aligned length of this line as 0.16. Alright, everything turns black. There's no white dots. I'll change this line now to construction, and I'll change this arc, change that to construction. And so we have our new sketch geometry for sketch number 4. I'll finish that sketch, and I'll turn on the visibility of the other sketches. So this is going to give us some clearance right in this area. I will drag my timeline back to see all of my work planes, and I don't need to see the origin plane, so I'll hide the origin planes, and we're going to create some geometry along here. I don't need to see sketch number 4 for a while, so I'll turn off the visibility of sketch number 4, and we'll leave 1, 2, and 3 visible. I'm going to start a new sketch on this plane, so I'll right click on this plane and I'll do a create sketch.